centers of excellence. They were talking about something to stimulate it. Today, our earlier speakers talked about how to stimulate industry, how to stimulate what we do, and the fact that it is an interdependence. In the United States, the Committee for National Security Standards started putting out training standards. They're available, they're not classified, anybody can use them. They say, these are the things that if you're doing a particular job, you should probably know something about. We've started growing a faculty. I am chairman of something called the Colloquium for Information Systems Security Education. Our first meeting had 17 people. Last year, we had almost 400 at our meeting. These are academicians from around the United States who come together once a year to talk about what's going on with computer security and information assurance. My colleagues at Georgia Tech hosted it several years ago, and it is something that is important to have sharing. Today I have met faculty not only from King Saud University but from other universities. That sharing is already beginning in Saudi Arabia. We have to increase student involvement. It's easy to find students who want to be hackers. That's a game for them. To engage them intellectually and to make them think and want to move forward, that is really tricky. You have to engage them, you have to involve them, you have to make them interested in it. And this last item, in terms of the clearinghouse, NIATEC, the National Information Assurance Training and Education Center, which I also direct, was opened. It's a place where academicians can freely exchange teaching materials and research papers and so forth in such a way that they are able to make their own programs grow faster. So when we start with yesterday being nothing, we now have something. Just like that desert that I live in, right now we have snow. So we have water. That's good. I have to move the snow. That's bad. But we have to think about the fact that we have been moving forward. Where do we begin? From through the looking glass. Where's a good place to begin? It's at the beginning. We have to recognize that there is a very large body of knowledge, a common body of knowledge within information assurance that should be in all IT courses. It is the responsibility to make sure, and researchers are pushing that now, to make sure that that body of knowledge gets shared. A couple things to think about. Every student in computer science or information systems should understand the elements of information assurance, know something about it. For those of you who may be interested in programming, I did a survey 3 years ago. Less than 5% of the computer science courses in their first 2 courses taught students that a buffer overflow was a bad idea. And yet buffer overflow is the largest single flaw in most commercial software. Second point, every student who understands information technology should also understand information assurance. And finally, the last point in this one is every citizen should be aware of information security and information assurance in some form. For if they are not, they will become part of the problem instead of part of the solution. So, what does it depend upon? Information assurance depends upon information science, computer science, and cryptography. That's clear. There is a great deal of research going on in those areas. Worldwide, there is an agenda for research in those areas. But people forget that we have to have policy, law, and practice in that. Why would I do it? How should I do it? Business models. Because you see, in the final analysis, if I can't prove to you that it will be cost effective, then you're probably not going to do it. We have to have physical security. We have to have people that deal with staff integrity. and all of the administrative and operational pieces. And the final piece is actually very important, and we'll see that in a moment. And that will be talking about training and education of staff. If we don't do that, none of the rest of the things that we talk about today will make much difference. So the history of the Centers of Academic Excellence program in the United States. After we brought together the few people to talk about it, various people in the Clinton administration said, we have to do something. We must make change. We must make this happen. They said that, and then they said, oh, by the way, we don't have any funding. There's no money to do that. Now, in the United States, academicians have a bad habit. We walk around with an empty rice bowl begging. But this was one where a group of us realized that even if there was no money, it was important to be done. So we worked on producing federal training standards based upon the Committee of National Security Systems and the National Institute of Standards. And they created a Centers of Excellence program which said, are you teaching these materials? Now, there was a downside to it. This was managed by the Department of Defense, and it was managed by the Department of Homeland Security. This is not always a group of people that academics trust in the United States. They always worry about them. But we discovered there was little pressure. It was just, please, go. We're not giving you any money. There are no strings attached. Please go do this. And in fact, Centers of Excellence were formed. The role has been to provide leadership and expansion of faculty and curriculum to provide a safe infrastructure. My colleague, Khalid, has in fact recognized that here, and Saudi Arabia is among the leaders in making this happen. Professor Norbik is doing this in Malaysia. It is fantastic to see this happening because we have to have leadership, and it cannot just be from a single economy. It must come from many economies. It must be broad-based. The diversity of input to that system is important. Dr. Spafford, would say, well, if you gave us a little more, we might do more. But in fact, there's a duty that we have, and sharing is part of that duty. The importance of the CAE program. Some would say it's irrelevant. Oh, government shouldn't be trying to stimulate academia to do various things. Clearly, think about this, the government put together a system and someone is surprised that there is too much paperwork. Have you ever seen something done by any government that did not involve too much paperwork? And the other complaint which they had is that many of the things that we were doing were not really education, but were training. But that's one which at least you're making a partial step. And programs like that at Georgia Tech, Professor Norbik's program, are getting around the difference between training and education. I see the other side. I say we are moving forward, and in fact, we have been stimulating research. In the last 10 years, the number of PhDs in the United States in computer security and information assurance has gone up 20-fold. That's change. It's probably a good change. And worldwide, we have seen that as well. But when we look at the paperwork, this is a screenshot of a tool that I use, and I don't expect you to actually be able to read it. But there are thousands of little things that the federal government wants you to report on if you're going to be a center of excellence. They say, are you teaching this? Are you teaching that? How much of this are you teaching? And instead of doing it the way that the federal government wants, we've actually put together a web app, and anybody can come in and they can do it, and all the paperwork goes away. When we're done, we push a button, it prints it, and you send it to the federal government. It makes life much easier. But the other thing that we do that is important is we track our students. Or, for those of you who are in industry, you can track your employees, because here are a long list of things